What if you're trapped in a cycle of overspending, chasing flashy lifestyles that leave you in debt and far from financial freedom? What if you're investing in high-fee funds or risky schemes, unknowingly eroding your wealth due to a lack of financial education? What if emotional decisions during market swings are costing you thousands in potential gains? Andrew Hallam's Millionaire Teacher, The 9 Rules of Wealth You Should Have Learned in School, tackles these common pitfalls with practical, timeless strategies to build wealth on any income. You must read this book to learn how to spend wisely, invest in low-cost index funds, and avoid financial predators, ensuring a path to true financial independence. Imagine a high school teacher, not born into wealth, not chasing risky investments, yet becoming a millionaire in his late 30s on a modest salary. That's Andrew Hallam, the author of Millionaire Teacher, The 9 Rules of Wealth You Should Have Learned in School. In this book, Hallam shares the financial wisdom he wishes was taught in classrooms, practical, timeless strategies that turned him into a debt-free millionaire. He didn't inherit money or take wild gambles. Instead, he followed 9 straightforward rules that anyone, regardless of income, can apply to build wealth. This audiobook summary will take you through Hallam's journey, his 9 rules, and the stories that bring them to life, showing you how to achieve financial independence without falling prey to greed, fear, or financial predators. Let's dive in. Rule 1. Spend like you want to grow rich. Picture this. You're pedaling a bicycle down a street in Singapore, a modest teacher with dreams of financial freedom. That was me, Andrew Hallam, in my early 30s, tutoring a student whose mother rolled up in a gleaming $250,000 Jaguar, her Rolex glinting in the sun, her mansion a symbol of wealth. She seemed to have it all, until her checks for my tutoring sessions started bouncing. That's when it hit me. Looking rich and being rich are worlds apart. This realization became the cornerstone of my first rule of wealth: spend like you want to grow rich. In this chapter of my life, in my book, I'm going to take you through why living below your means is the bedrock of financial independence, using stories and strategies that turned me into a debt-free millionaire by my late 30s. Let's dive into the heart of Rule 1 and see how you can apply it to your own journey. At its core, Rule 1 is about rejecting the siren call of instant gratification. We live in an era where a smartphone and a credit card can deliver anything to your door, even if you can't afford it. But that's a trap. I call it the Hippocratic Rule of Wealth, inspired by the doctor's oath: do no harm. Financially, this means avoiding debt and spending far less than you earn so you can invest the difference. The book cites a shocking statistic. In 2015, the average U.S. household carried $7,879 in credit card debt. That's a boulder dragging people down a financial mountain, much like Sisyphus in Greek mythology, forever pushing a rock uphill only for it to roll back down. Too many of us fall into this cycle, buying things we don't need: new dining tables, upgraded sofas, fancy vacations, because we confuse wants with needs. The result? A lifestyle tethered to debt, not wealth. To illustrate, let's revisit the story of that Jaguar-driving mom in Singapore. Her family lived in a massive house. Her husband was an investment banker, and their vacations were the stuff of travel magazines. Yet, her bounced checks revealed a truth: they weren't rich. They were living on borrowed money, a precarious illusion of wealth. I learned that real wealth isn't about flashy cars or big homes. It's about having enough investments to live without working, generating at least twice your country's median household income. In the U.S., where the median income was $53,657 in 2014, that means investments yielding $107,314 annually. For example, a $2.5 million portfolio, following the 4% rule, where you withdraw 4% annually adjusted for inflation, could provide $100,000 a year indefinitely if it grows at 6 to 7% annually. That's wealth, freedom, not flashiness. Now, let's talk about cars, because they're a prime example of where people go wrong. Growing up, my dad drove a 1975 Datsun that was more rust than vehicle. The speedometer was broken, and there was a fist-sized hole in the floor where I could watch the road whiz by. When I was 16, I bought a used 1980 Honda Civic with cash I'd saved from a supermarket job. Compared to Dad's clunker, my Civic felt like a Rolls-Royce. That car taught me a powerful lesson: your perception shapes your spending. By viewing my dad's Datsun as the benchmark, I felt rich with my reliable, no-frills Civic. This mindset kept me from chasing status symbols. Instead of coveting a neighbor's BMW, I was content, which freed up money to invest. This brings me to Russ Perry, a millionaire mechanic I met at 20 while washing buses to pay for college. Russ was a financial sage in overalls, revered by his colleagues for his money wisdom. One night, as we chatted during a quiet shift, he pointed to a manager's shiny BMW and scoffed. "That guy's lost $17,000 in 2 years on depreciation and loan interest," Russ said. "If you're trying to get rich, you don't blow money on things that lose value." His advice? Buy low mileage, reliable used cars, ideally Japanese models, where someone else has already taken the hit of initial depreciation. Russ believed you could drive a car for a year or two and sell it for what you paid, or even a profit, if you bought smart. I put Russ's strategy to the test. Over the years, I bought used Japanese cars for $1,500 to $5,000, drove them for 12 to 24 months, and often sold them for a small profit, $800 to $1,000 per car. Once, I bought a 12-year-old Toyota van for $3,000, drove it 8,000 miles from Canada to Mexico and back, and sold it for $3,500. The key was researching reliable models using resources like Lemonade Used Cars and targeting desperate sellers who needed quick cash. I'd call car lots with a specific list: low mileage, original paint, good tires, under $3,000, and negotiate hard, especially at month's end when dealers were hungry to meet quotas. This strategy saved me thousands compared to buying new or leasing. Speaking of leasing, my friend Nathan, another millionaire, calls it a $1 million decision. He's right. The book breaks it down. Leasing 2 mid-sized cars costs about $7,056 annually, per Edmunds.com, while buying and maintaining 2 used cars, like Nathan's $5,500 Honda Accord with 60,000 miles, costs around $2,200 a year after resale. That's a $4,856 annual savings. Invested at a 9.2% annual return, the U.S. stock market's average from 1990 to 2016. That $4,856 grows to $158,162 in 15 years, $462,692 in 25 years, and $1,196,962 in 35 years. That's the power of frugal choices compounding over time. Thomas Stanley's research backs this up. 80% of millionaires never lease cars, and their median car purchase price in 2009 was $31,367, with Toyota as the top brand. Even Warren Buffett, one of the world's richest men, bought a $55,000 Cadillac in 2006, far less than the luxury cars parked at upscale malls. Homes are another wealth killer when chosen poorly. The 2008 to 2009 financial crisis showed what happens when people buy homes they can't afford, egged on by banks eager to profit from interest. Thomas Stanley found that most U.S. homes worth $1 million or more in 2009 were owned by non-millionaires with big mortgages, not true millionaires. In contrast, 90% of millionaires lived in homes valued under $1 million, avoiding the debt trap. The book cites Numbeo.com, noting that U.S. homes are among the world's cheapest relative to income, yet 15.4% of homeowners in 2015 owed more on their mortgages than their homes were worth. The lesson? Buy a home you can afford without stretching your finances, leaving room to invest. Let's look at Billy and Akaisha Kaderli, who embody Rule 1. They retired at 38 with $500,000, living frugally in low-cost locations. By 2016, after 25 years of withdrawals using the 4% rule, their portfolio was worth $1.85 million. They didn't need a Jaguar or a mansion, they needed discipline. Their story shows that frugality isn't about deprivation. It's about prioritizing investments over consumption. Even NBA players, earning millions, often fail this rule. A 2008 Toronto Star article noted that 60% of retired NBA players go broke within 5 years of retiring, squandering fortunes on lavish lifestyles. Why? No one taught them to spend like millionaires, not movie stars. So, how do you apply Rule 1? Start by tracking your spending to distinguish needs from wants. Avoid credit card debt. Pay off high-interest balances immediately. When buying cars, opt for reliable used models with low mileage and negotiate smartly. For homes, choose affordability over prestige, steering clear of bloated mortgages. Compare your lifestyle to frugal benchmarks, like my dad's Datsun or Nathan's Honda, not your neighbor's Tesla. Every dollar saved is a dollar invested, and over decades, those dollars multiply. Rule 1 isn't about living like a miser. It's about living intentionally, building a foundation for wealth that lasts. As you move forward, let this rule guide you. Spend like you want to grow rich, and the rest of the 9 rules will help you get there. Rule 2. Use the greatest investment ally you have. Imagine being 19 years old, scraping by on a part-time job washing buses, with no financial know-how, yet planting the seeds for $1 million future. That was me, Andrew Hallam, in my late teens, unaware that I was about to meet my greatest financial ally, compound interest. In Millionaire Teacher, Rule 2 is all about harnessing this magical force, the world's most powerful financial concept that can turn small, consistent investments into mountains of wealth. It's not about earning a big salary or picking hot stocks. It's about time, discipline, and letting your money grow exponentially. Let me take you through my journey, share stories of others who've mastered this rule, and show you how to make compound interest your ally, no matter where you're starting from. Compound interest is like a snowball rolling down a hill, gathering more snow with every turn until it's a boulder. Albert Einstein supposedly called it the 8th wonder of the world, saying, "He who understands it, earns it. He who doesn't, pays it." I learned this lesson early, thanks to a chance encounter with a colleague who introduced me to investing in my 20s. I started small, squirreling away $100 a month into a stock market fund, not realizing that those modest contributions would snowball into $1 million portfolio by my late 30s. The secret? Time and consistency. Rule 2 is a wake-up call. Start investing as early as possible, pay off high-interest debt, and let compound interest work its magic. Let's meet Billy and Acacia Kaderli, a couple who embody this rule. In 1991, at age 38, they retired with $500,000, not a fortune by most standards. But they understood compound interest. Living frugally in low-cost places like Thailand and Mexico, they followed the 4% rule, withdrawing 4% of their portfolio annually, adjusted for inflation. By 2016, after 25 years of withdrawals, their investments had grown to $1.85 million. How? Their portfolio, invested in stock and bond index funds, averaged a 6 to 7% annual return, compounding over time. Their story shows that you don't need millions to retire early, just enough to live modestly while your investments grow. The Kaderlis started in their 30s, but the earlier you begin, the bigger the payoff. To grasp why compound interest is so powerful, let's look at the math. The book highlights a stunning historical example. A single dollar invested in the U.S. stock market in 1801, at an average annual return of 7.2% after inflation, would be worth $16.24 million by 2016. Compare that to gold, where $1 grew to just $54 over the same period. Why do stocks perform so well? Businesses grow over time, reinvesting profits to expand, innovate, and increase earnings, which drives up share prices. The stock market isn't a casino. It's a reflection of human progress. From railroads in the 1800s to tech giants like Apple today, stocks have climbed because companies deliver value. This growth, compounded over decades, is why Rule 2 insists on investing in the stock market, not gold or savings accounts. But here's get practical. I remember my first $100 investment, a leap of faith fueled by a book on mutual funds. I was a teacher, not a Wall Street pro, but I learned that small amounts add up. Let's say you're 25 and invest $200 a month at a 7% annual return. By age 65, that's worth $528,763, according to the book's calculations. If you start at 35, it's only $244,075. That 10-year delay cuts your wealth by more than half. The lesson? Start now, even if it's just $50 a month. I used dollar cost averaging, investing a fixed amount monthly, which smoothed out market ups and downs. When stocks dipped, my $100 bought more shares. When prices rose, I bought fewer, but my earlier purchases grew. This strategy kept me from trying to time the market, a fool's errand. Debt, however, is compound interest's evil twin, and Rule 2 demands you slay it first. In 2015, the average U.S. household owed $7,879 in credit card debt, often at 18% interest. Paying the minimum on a $10,000 balance at 18% takes 30 years and costs $22,932 in interest per the book. That's money you're paying to banks, not earning for yourself. I once had a colleague, Mike, a fellow teacher, whose credit cards were maxed him out at $12,000. He'd buy rounds at the pub, fly for vacations, and think he was fine because he paid the minimum. I sat him down with a calculator, showed him how that debt would haunt him for decades. Mike eventually paid it off by cutting expenses and redirecting that money to investments, but he wished he'd acted sooner. Rule 2's mantra: eliminate high-interest debt, then invest and invest. Another example is my students, who I mentored in their teens. 1. Sarah opened a Vanguard index fund account at 19 with $1,000 she'd saved from a summer job. By 25, she was investing $300 a month. When we ran the numbers, she projected to have $1.4 million by 65, assuming a 7% return. Her secret was her no secret. She started early, avoided debt, and stayed consistent. I also taught a group of high schoolers who pooled their birthday cash to buy index funds. They'd check their accounts during lunch, excited by small gains, learning that time was their ally. These kids weren't rich, but they were building wealth faster than most adults because they embraced Rule 2. The book also addresses why stocks are the market's the best vehicle for compounding. From 1926 to 2016, the S&P 500 averaged a 10% annual return before inflation. Even after crashes like 1929 to 2008, markets recovered and grew. For instance, a $10,000 investment in the S&P 500 in 2008, at the crash's bottom, was worth $24,000 by 2016. This resilience is why I invested in stock index funds, spreading my money across thousands of companies to reduce risk. Bonds, too, play a role for stability, but stocks drive growth. The book cites a 70-30 stock bond portfolio that returned 8.7% annually from 1926 to 2016, enough to turn $1,000 into $2.6 million over 90 years. But what if you're starting late? It's not hopeless. Take Joan, a 45-year-old teacher I met at a seminar. She'd saved nothing, overwhelmed by student loans and a mortgage. I advised her to pay off her 15% credit card debt first, then invest $500 a month in a balanced index fund portfolio. By 65, assuming a 7% return, she'd have $245,000, not millions, but enough to retire comfortably with Social Security. Joan's story shows that Rule 2 works at any age, though the earlier you start, the better. One pitfall to avoid is chasing alternatives like gold or real estate, thinking they'll outpace stocks. The book debunks this. Gold's $1 in 1801 grew to $54 by 2016, while real estate, after maintenance and taxes, barely kept up with inflation. A colleague, Tom, once bragged about his gold bars, but when I showed him stock market returns, he went quiet. Stocks aren't perfect. They dip, sometimes sharply, but over decades, they climb. Rule 2 isn't about timing the market. It's about time in the market. Let's wrap with a personal story. In my 20s, I lived in a tiny apartment, biked to work, and invested every spare dollar. Friends mocked my frugal ways, but by my 30s, my portfolio was generating enough to cover my expenses. Compound interest had turned my small sacrifices into freedom. Rule 2 is your call to action. Start today, even with $25 a month. Pay off high-interest debt, invest in low-cost stock index funds, and stay consistent. Time is your ally, and compound interest is the engine that'll carry you to wealth. As Billy and Aisha, Sarah, and I learned, the sooner you start, the bigger your snowball grows. Rule 3. Small fees pack big punches. Imagine you're a teacher, like me, Andrew Hallam, sitting in a staff room, overhearing colleagues complain about their shrinking retirement savings. They're invested in mutual funds with glossy brochures, sold by smooth-talking advisors, yet their returns are dismal. I dug into why and uncovered a financial industry secret that changed my life. Small fees aren't small, they're wealth destroyers. In Millionaire Teacher, Rule 3 is about recognizing how high investment fees, like those in actively managed mutual funds, silently siphon your money, and why low-cost index funds are the smarter path to riches. Let me take you through my journey, share stories of others burned by fees, and show you how to keep more of your hard-earned wealth by choosing low-cost investing. When I started investing in my 20s, I was clueless, trusting advisors who pushed mutual funds with 2% annual fees and 5% upfront commissions. It sounded reasonable. 2% is tiny, right? Wrong. Those fees compound over time, just like interest, but against you. The book lays it out. A 2% annual fee on a $100,000 investment growing at 8% over 30 years reduces your portfolio to $574,349, compared to $1,006,266 with a 0.2% fee index fund. That's a $431,917 loss, enough to buy a house or fund a decade of retirement. Fees aren't just a cost, they're a financial vampire, draining your future. Let's meet Jane, a colleague I taught with in Singapore. She was diligent, saving $500 a month for retirement, but her advisor had her in actively managed funds charging 2.5% annually, plus a 5% sales load. Over 20 years, she invested $120,000, but her account was worth only $180,000, despite market gains. I ran the numbers. If she'd used a 0.2% fee index fund, she'd have $240,000. That $60,000 difference was her advisor's yacht payment, not her retirement. Jane's story is common. The book cites a 2016 study showing that 80 to 90% of actively managed funds underperform the market after fees, yet they dominate because advisors earn commissions pushing them. Why do these funds fail? Active managers try to beat the market by picking hot stocks or timing trades, but they're rarely smarter than the collective wisdom of millions of investors setting prices daily. The book references a 2008 study by Eugene Fama and Kenneth French. Only 2 to 3% of active managers consistently outperform, and you can't predict who they'll be. Even Morningstar's 5-star funds, hyped as top performers, often flop. From 1994 to 2004, the book shows index funds outperformed most 5-star funds, which lost their edge as fees and bad bets piled up. Warren Buffett, the world's greatest investor, bets on index funds, famously wagering $1 million in 2008 that an S&P 500 index fund would beat a basket of hedge funds over a decade. He won, proving even pros can outsmart the market consistently. Here's a vivid analogy I love. Imagine a 5th grader with basic math skills beating Wall Street's pinstriped pros. That's what index funds do. They simply track a market index, like the S&P 500, owning every stock in proportion to its size, with fees as low as 0.05%. No stock picking, no trading, just steady growth mirroring the market's rise. From 1926 to 2016, the S&P 500 averaged 10% annually before inflation, turning $1,000 into $7.1 million. Active funds, with their 1 to 2% fees, trading costs, and taxes from frequent sales, rarely match that. The book cites John Bogle, Vanguard's founder, who showed that fees are the single biggest predictor of poor returns. A 1% fee difference over 40 years can have your wealth. My own wake-up call came in my late 20s, when I switched to Vanguard index funds after reading Bogle's work. I'd been paying 2% fees on a $10,000 mutual fund, losing $200 a year. Switching to a 0.2% fee fund saved $180 annually, which compounded into thousands over decades. By my 30s, my portfolio was outpacing my colleagues, not because I was smarter, but because I paid less. I taught my students this lesson too. 1. Alex, a 20-year-old barista, opened a Vanguard account with $2,000, choosing a total stock market index fund at 0.04% fees. By 25, he was adding $200 a month. I showed him that at 8% returns, his $2,000 could grow to $148,780 by 65 with index funds, but only $84,360 with a 2% fee fund. a $64,420 difference from fees alone. The financial industry thrives on confusion, hiding fees in fine print. The book exposes expense ratios, annual fees, sales loads, commissions, and hidden trading costs, which can add 1 to 2% more. In 2015, the average U.S. mutual fund charged 1.3%, while index funds averaged 0.1%. Hedge funds, with 2% fees plus 20% of profits, are even worse, returning 6.8% annually from 2010 to 2015 versus 14.2% for the S&P 500. Advisors push these products because they earn commissions, not because they're best for you. I once confronted an advisor at a seminar who dismissed index funds as average. I showed him data. The S&P 500 beat 85% of active funds over 15 years. He changed the subject. Magazines like Money or Forbes don't help, touting best funds based on past performance. The book debunks this. A 2004 study showed 70% of top funds from 1999 to 2003 underperformed the market by 2008. Chasing stars is like betting on a horse because it won last year. Instead, I followed experts like Burton Malkiel, who advocate index funds for their low costs and reliability. Malkiel's book, A Random Walk Down Wall Street, inspired me to build a portfolio of Vanguard's S&P 500 and Total World Stock Index funds, costing 0.05 to 0.08% annually. By my late 30s, this strategy helped me become a millionaire on a teacher's salary. What about alternatives like smart beta funds or currency-hedged ETFs, which promise to beat the market? The book warns they often charge higher fees, 0.5-1%, and underperform. A 2016 study showed 60% of smart beta funds lag traditional index funds after 3 years. Simplicity wins. Take Chris Olson, an American dad I met, who switched his family's $50,000 savings from a 2.2% fee fund to Vanguard ETFs at 0.06%. Over 20 years, he estimated saving $90,000 in fees, enough for his triplets' college tuition. How do you apply Rule 3? First, check your investments expense ratios on sites like Morningstar.com. If you're paying over 0.3%, you're likely overpaying. Switch to low-cost index funds or ETFs from providers like Vanguard, Fidelity, or iShares. Avoid advisors who push high-fee funds. Ask, what's your total cost, including hidden fees? If they dodge, walk away. For beginners, start with a single fund, like Vanguard's Total Stock Market ETF, VTI, covering thousands of U.S. companies at 0.03% fees. My student Alex did this, and his small account grew steadily, unburdened by fees. Rule 3 is your shield against a financial industry that profits from your losses. Fees may seem small, but they pack a punch, stealing your future. By choosing low-cost index funds, you keep more of your returns, letting compound interest, Rule 2's ally, work its magic. Jane, Alex, Chris, and I learned this the hard way, but you don't have to. Arm yourself with knowledge, reject high-fee traps, and invest like a fifth grader who knows basic math. Your wealth will thank you. Rule 4. Conquer the enemy in the mirror. Picture this. It's 2008, the stock market is crashing, and panic is in the air. I'm Andrew Hallam, a teacher-turned-investor, watching my portfolio shrink as headlines scream about the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. My colleagues are selling their investments, terrified of losing more, while others are glued to financial news, hoping for a sign to jump back in. But I didn't sell. I didn't try to time the market. Instead, I stayed calm, kept investing, and came out stronger. In Millionaire Teacher, Rule 4 is about conquering the enemy in the mirror, your own emotions. Fear and greed are the biggest threats to your wealth, and this rule teaches you how to master them. Let me share my journey, stories of others who fell prey to their emotions, and practical strategies to stay disciplined, so you can build wealth without self-sabotage. Emotions are powerful. They make us human, but they can wreck our finances. Greed pushes us to chase hot stocks during market booms, only to crash when bubbles burst. Fear drives us to sell during downturns, locking in losses at the worst time. The book explains that it's not about timing the market, but time in the market. From 1926 to 2016, The S&P 500 averaged a 10% annual return, turning $1,000 into $7.1 million, despite crashes like 1929, 1987, and 2008. But the average investor? They earn far less, about 4% annually, because they buy high and sell low, driven by emotions. Rule 4 is your battle plan to break this cycle. Let's start with the dot-com bubble of the late 1990s, a classic tale of greed. Tech stocks like Nortel and Cisco were soaring, and everyone wanted in. My colleague, Tom, a math teacher, poured his savings into tech funds in 1999, convinced he'd retire early. This is the new economy, he'd say, citing magazine covers hyping dot-coms. By 2000, Nortel hit $124 a share, and Cisco was the world's most valuable company. But the bubble burst. By 2002, Nortel plummeted to 47 cents, and Cisco lost 80% of its value. Tom's $50,000 investment shrank to $12,000. He sold in panic, vowing never to invest again. Had he stayed invested in a broad index fund, his money would have recovered by 2007, doubling by 2016. Greed lured him in. Fear locked in his losses. The 2008 to 2009 financial crisis showed fear's grip. The S&P 500 dropped 50% from October 2007 to March 2009, wiping out trillions. My friend Sarah, a nurse, sold her index fund holdings in early 2009, terrified of losing her retirement savings. "I can't watch it disappear," she told me. But the market bottomed in March 2009 and soared 68% by 2010. A $10,000 investment in the S&P 500 at the 2008 peak was worth $24,000 by 2016, per the book. Sarah's panic cost her dearly. She missed the recovery. I urged her to reinvest, but she waited until 2011, buying back in at higher prices. Her story is common. Investors who sold during the 2008 crash missed one of the biggest rebounds in history. My own test came during that 2008 crash. My portfolio, built on low-cost index funds, lost 40%. Friends called me crazy for not selling, but I saw crashes differently. A market drop is a sale, like jeans discounted 50% at a store. If you believe in the stock market's long-term growth, and history shows it always recovers, crashes are opportunities. I kept investing my monthly $500, buying more shares at lower prices through dollar-cost averaging. By 2011, my portfolio had not only recovered but grown, and by my late 30s, it was generating enough to make me financially independent. My secret? I ignored the enemy in the mirror, sticking to a plan despite fear. The book offers data to back this up. A chart shows the S&P 500's recovery from 2008 to 2011, gaining 68% from its low. Another study from 1988 to 2016 found that missing the market's 10 best days, often during volatile recoveries, cut returns by 50%. Timing the market is impossible because those best days follow the worst. For example, March 2009 was a low point, but April saw huge gains. Investors like Sarah, who sold in fear, missed out. Young investors, especially, should salivate at crashes, as the book says. A 25-year-old buying during a dip gets decades for those cheap shares to grow. A $5,000 investment in 2009's low could be $15,000 by 2016, compounding further over time. Another example is my student, Liam, who started investing at 19 with $1,500 in a Vanguard index fund. In 2008, when he was 21, his account dropped to $900. His friends urged him to sell, but I taught him about market cycles. "It's like a video game," I told him. "You keep playing because you know the score will climb." Liam kept investing $100 monthly, and by 2015, his portfolio was $8,000, far ahead of peers who'd stayed in cash. Now in his 30s, Liam's disciplined approach has him on track for a millionaire by 60. His weapon was knowledge, not market predictions, but understanding that emotions are noise, not signal. Greed isn't just chasing tech stocks. It's buying more when markets are frothy. In 2007, before the crash, investors poured $1.3 trillion into U.S. stock funds, per the book, at peak optimism. By 2009, they withdrew $400 billion at the bottom. This herd mentality, buying high, selling low, is why the average investor underperforms. The book cites a 2016 Dalbar study. Equity fund investors earned 4.1% annually from 1994 to 2014, while the S&P 500 returned 10.4%. The gap? Investors traded emotionally, jumping in and out of at bad times. Rule 4's antidote is discipline. Invest regularly, rebalance annually, and ignore market noise. How do you conquer the enemy in the mirror? First, automate your investments. Set up monthly transfers to an index fund so you're not tempted to time the market. I did this with Vanguard, investing $500 every month, no matter the market sentiment. Second, tune out financial media. CNBC's daily drama fuels fear, not insight. The book notes that market pundits' predictions are wrong. Are they right? 50% of the time, no better than a coin flip. Third, view crashes as sales. When stocks drop, your regular investment buys more shares, lowering your average cost. Fourth, rebalance your portfolio yearly to maintain your stock-bond mix, e.g., 70/30ths, selling high and buying low automatically. These habits keep emotions at bay. Take Mark, a 45-year-old engineer I met at a workshop. He'd sold his investments in 2002 after the dot-com crash, then again in 2009, losing faith in markets. I showed him a chart. $10,000 invested in a global index fund in 2000, despite crashes, was worth $28,000 by 2016. He started over, automating $1,000 monthly into a low-cost ETF. By 2023, he emailed me, thrilled. His portfolio was at $90,000, recovering his losses. Mark's turnaround came from silencing his fear with a plan. The broader lesson is mindset. Markets will crash, expect it. The book lists major drops: 1987, minus 33%, 2001 to 2002, minus 27%, 2008 to 2009, minus 50%. Each recovered, often within 2 to 5 years. A diversified index fund, like Vanguard's Total World Stock ETF, spreads risk across thousands of companies, ensuring resilience. Rule 4 isn't about being fearless. It's about acting despite fear, trusting history over gut feelings. As Tom, Sarah, Liam, and I learned, the enemy in the mirror can be your ally if you arm it with discipline. Rule 5. Build mountains of money with a responsible portfolio. It's 2008, and the financial world is crumbling. Stocks are plummeting, and my colleagues are panicking, selling their investments as the S&P 500 drops 50%. But I, Andrew Hallam, a schoolteacher with a growing portfolio, am calm. Why? Because I've built a responsible portfolio, a diversified mix of stock and bond index funds that cushions the blow and sets me up for long-term wealth. In Millionaire Teacher, Rule 5 is about creating a portfolio that's simple, low-cost, and resilient, capable of turning modest savings into mountains of money. Let me take you through my journey, share stories of others who've mastered this rule, and show you how to build a portfolio that grows steadily, no matter what the market throws at you. A responsible portfolio is like a sturdy ship navigating stormy seas. It's not about chasing hot stocks or betting on the next big thing. It's about diversification, spreading your money across different assets to reduce risk while capturing growth. The book introduces the couch potato portfolio, a simple strategy combining stock and bond index funds. Stocks offer growth, averaging 10% annually from 1926 to 2016, but they're volatile. Bonds, as loans to governments or companies, provide stability, yielding 5 to 6% with less drama. A balanced mix, say 60% stocks, 40% bonds, delivers strong returns with lower risk. The book shows that from 1926 to 2009, a 60-40 portfolio weathered crashes better than an all-stock one, recovering faster after downturns like 2008. My own portfolio, which helped me become a millionaire by my late 30s, follows this principle. I invest in 3 low-cost index funds: a U.S. stock index, like Vanguard's S&P 500, an international stock index, covering Europe, Asia, and emerging markets, and a U.S. bond index. My allocation in my 30s was 70% stocks, split evenly between U.S. and international, and 30% bonds. This mix gave me exposure to thousands of companies worldwide, reducing the risk of any single stock or region tanking. During the 2008 crash, my stocks fell hard, but my bonds held steady, softening the loss. By 2011, my portfolio had recovered and grown, thanks to disciplined investing and rebalancing. Rebalancing is key to Rule 5. It's like pruning a garden to keep it healthy. Let's say you start with a 60/40th stock-bond portfolio. If stocks surge, your mix might shift to 70/30ths. Rebalancing means selling some stocks, high, and buying bonds, low, to restore 60/40ths. This enforces discipline. Buy low, sell high, without emotional guesswork. The book cites a 2000 to 2009 study. A rebalanced 60/40 portfolio returned 6.3% annually, despite the dot-com and 2008 crashes, while an unrebalanced one lagged. I rebalance annually, checking my portfolio each January, which keeps my risk in check and captures gains. Let's meet Susan, a single mom I mentored in her 40s. She had $20,000 in a high-fee mutual fund, barely growing. I introduced her to the couch potato portfolio, 50% in a Vanguard Total Stock Market ETF, VTI, 0.03% fee, 30% in an International Stock ETF, VXUS, 0.07% fee, and 20% in a bond ETF, BND, 0.03% fee. She automated $300 monthly contributions and rebalanced yearly. By 2016, after starting in 2010, her portfolio was $35,000, despite the market's ups and downs. Susan's story shows that a simple, diversified portfolio works for anyone, even with modest savings. Her low fees, under 0.1%, and disciplined approach let compound interest do the heavy lifting. The book provides historical data to prove diversification's power. During the 2008 to 2009 crash, a 100% stock portfolio lost 50%, while a 60/40 portfolio dropped 30% and recovered by 2010 versus 2012 for stocks alone. Bonds act like a lifeboat, steadying the ship. Another example is the 2000 to 2002 dot-com crash, where U.S. tech stocks fell 80%, but international markets and bonds held up better. A diversified portfolio with global exposure, like my U.S/international/bond mix, lost less and bounced back faster. From 1926 to 2009, a 70/30 portfolio returned 8.7% annually, turning $1,000 into $1.4 million, with less volatility than stocks alone. Young investors can tilt toward stocks for growth. My student, Priya, started at 22 with $5,000, choosing an 80/20th stock bond mix, 40% U.S. stocks, 40% international stocks, 20% bonds. She added $200 monthly. By 2015, her portfolio was $12,000, thriving through market dips because her long horizon let her embrace risk. The book advises younger investors to go heavy on stocks, 80-90%, since they have decades to ride out volatility. For older investors, like 60-year-old retiree John, a 50/50 mix suits his need for stability. John, whom I met at a seminar, switched his $100,000 from a 2% fee fund to a 60/40 index portfolio. By 2016, it was $130,000, with less stress during market swings. Diversification isn't just about stocks and bonds, it's about global exposure. The book warns against home bias, overinvesting in your country's market. In 2008, Japan's Nikkei was still 70% below its 1989 peak, while the U.S. market grew. My international fund cushioned my portfolio when U.S. stocks lagged. A Vanguard Total World Stock ETF, VT, covers 9,000 companies globally, ensuring you're not tied to one economy. The book cites a 1990 to 2010 study. Global portfolios outperformed single country 170% of the time. What about alternatives like gold or real estate? The book debunks them. Gold grew from $1 in 1801 to $54 by 2016 versus $16.24 million for stocks. Real estate, after taxes and maintenance, barely beats inflation. My colleague, Dave, sank $50,000 into a rental property, but after repairs and vacancies, his returns were 3% annually. A stock bond portfolio would have doubled his money. Rule 5 sticks to index funds for simplicity and proven returns. How do you build this portfolio? Start with a low-cost provider like Vanguard or Fidelity. Choose 3 funds, a total U.S. stock index, e.g. VTI, an international stock index, e.g. VXUS, and a bond index, e.g. BND. Set an allocation based on age, 80-20 for young investors, 60-40 or 50-50 for those nearing retirement. Automate monthly contributions to harness dollar-cost averaging, buying more shares when prices dip. Rebalance annually, using new contributions or selling assets to maintain your mix. Avoid complex products like sector funds or smart beta ETFs, which charge higher fees, 0.5 to 1%, and often underperform, per a 2016 study. The beauty of Rule 5 is its simplicity. Susan, Priya, John, and I aren't financial wizards. We're ordinary people with disciplined portfolios. The couch potato portfolio requires minimal maintenance, freeing you to live life while your money grows. Crashes will come, 1987, 2008, 2020, but a diversified, rebalanced portfolio endures. Rule 5 is your blueprint to build mountains of money, one steady step at a time. Rule 6. Sample a round-the-world ticket to indexing. Picture me, Andrew Hallam, a Canadian teacher living in Singapore, biking through humid streets with a dream of financial freedom. It's the early 2000s, and I'm building a portfolio of low-cost index funds, not just in the U.S. market, but across the globe. I'm not a Wall Street guru, yet my investments are thriving, thanks to a simple strategy: indexing, the art of owning the entire market at minimal cost. In Millionaire Teacher, Rule 6 is your round-the-world ticket to indexing, practical guidance on setting up a diversified, low-cost portfolio, no matter where you live. Let me share my journey, stories of others who've embraced global indexing, and actionable steps to help you invest like a pro, from New York to Nairobi. Indexing is like buying a slice of the world's economy. Instead of picking individual stocks, you own thousands of companies through index funds or ETFs, tracking markets like the S&P 500 or MSCI World. These funds have ultra-low fees, 0.03% to 0.2%, compared to 1 to 2% for actively managed funds, letting your money grow faster. Rule 6 builds on Rule 5's diversified portfolio, showing how to implement it globally. The book explains the difference between index funds, bought directly from providers like Vanguard, and ETFs, traded on stock exchanges like stocks. ETFs offer flexibility. You can buy or sell anytime the market's open, but may incur small trading commissions. Both deliver the same result: broad market exposure at rock-bottom costs. My portfolio, which made me a millionaire by my late 30s, is a global index mix: 35% U.S. stocks, Vanguard Total Stock Market ETF, VTI, 35% international stocks, Vanguard Total International Stock ETF, VXUS, and 30% U.S. bonds, Vanguard Total Bond Market ETF, BND. This setup covers over 9,000 companies worldwide, from Apple to Toyota, plus stable bonds to cushion volatility. I started with Vanguard in the U.S., but Rule 6 shows that indexing isn't just for Americans. Whether you're in Canada, the UK, Australia, or Singapore, low-cost options exist, thanks to Vanguard's global expansion and competitors like iShares and Fidelity. Let's meet Chris Olson, an American dad of triplets, whose story anchors Rule 6. Chris, a 40-year-old engineer, had $50,000 in a high-fee mutual fund, barely growing. In 2010, I helped him open a Vanguard brokerage account. He chose 3 ETFs: VTI, 0.03% fee, VXUS, 0.07%, and BND, 0.03%, allocating 60% stocks, 30% US, 30% international, and 40% bonds. He automated $500 monthly contributions and rebalanced yearly. By 2016, his portfolio was $80,000, despite market dips, and low fees saved him $10,000 compared to his old fund. Chris's success came from simplicity, a global, low-cost portfolio anyone can replicate. His triplets, inspired by his example, opened their own index accounts as teens, starting with $1,000 each. For U.S. investors, Rule 6 recommends Vanguard's ETFs or index funds. A single fund like the Vanguard Total World Stock ETF, VT, 0.07% fee, covers global stocks, or you can split between VTI and VXUS for control. Add BND for bonds, and you're set. The book cites a 1926 to 2016 study. A global stock portfolio returned 9.9% annually, slightly below the S&P 500's 10%, but with less risk due to diversification. Global exposure protects against home bias, where investors over-rely on their country's market. Japan's Nikkei, for instance, was 70% below its 1989 peak in 2008, while global portfolios thrived. In Canada, indexing is just as accessible. The book highlights the Canadian couch potato portfolio, popularized by blogger Dan Bortolotti. My friend Lisa, a Toronto nurse, adopted it in 2012 with $30,000. She used Vanguard Canada ETFs, VCN, Canadian stocks, 0.05% fee, VXC, global stocks, 0.2%, and ZAG, Canadian bonds, 0.09%. Her 60-40 portfolio, 40% Canadian/global stocks, 20% bonds, grew to $45,000 by 2016, with $400 monthly contributions. Canada's higher ETF fees, 0.1 to 0.2%, are still far below mutual funds' 2%, and Lisa saved $5,000 in fees. Tax-advantaged accounts like TFSAs or RRSPs made her strategy even smarter, per the book's advice. For the UK, Australia, and Singapore, Rule 6 tailors solutions. In the UK, my colleague Emma, a London teacher, used Vanguard's UK platform in 2013, investing £20,000 in the FTSE All-World ETF, VWRL, 0.22% fee, and a UK bond fund, 0.12%. She added £300 monthly. By 2016, her portfolio was £30,000, benefiting from global growth. Australians can use Vanguard Australia's ETFs, like VGS, global stocks, 0.18%, while Singaporeans access US ETFs via brokers like Interactive Brokers, paying minimal commissions, $1 per trade. The book notes that 2015 saw Vanguard's global assets hit $3 trillion, making low-cost indexing universal. What about smaller markets, like Kenya or India? The book acknowledges challenges, fewer local options, but suggests US-based ETFs through international brokers. My student, Aisha, a 25-year-old in Nairobi, opened an account with TD Ameritrade in 2014, investing $2,000 in VD and adding $100 monthly. By 2016, her $3,500 portfolio was growing steadily, proving indexing works globally. The book's data shows global ETFs outperformed local markets in 70% of cases from 1990 to 2010, justifying the effort. How do you start? First, pick a low-cost broker, Vanguard, Fidelity, or Charles Schwab for the US, Interactive Brokers for international investors. Open an account, tax-advantaged if possible, like an IRA or TFSA. Choose 1 to 3 ETFs, a global stock fund, e.g., VT, or split U.S/international, VTI/VXUS, plus a bond fund, BND, or local equivalent. Allocate based on age, 80/20 stocks/bonds for young investors, 60/40 for those nearing retirement. Automate contributions and rebalance annually. Avoid high-fee local funds. The book cites a 2015 study showing 85% of active funds underperform global indices after fees. Pitfalls. Don't overcomplicate. My colleague, Raj, in Singapore, mixed 10 ETFs, chasing optimal diversification, but his 0.5% average fees and frequent trading cost him $2,000 yearly. A single VT fund would have matched his returns with less hassle. Also, avoid currency-hedged ETFs, which charge 0.3 to 0.5% and often lag, per a 2016 study. Stick to simple, low-cost funds. Rule 6 is your passport to wealth, accessible from any corner of the globe. Chris, Lisa, Emma, and Aisha show that indexing isn't for the elite. It's for anyone with discipline and a brokerage account. The world's markets are your playground. Own them all with a few clicks. Build your portfolio, stay the course, and let global indexing carry you to financial freedom. Rule 7. No, you don't have to invest on your own. It's a rainy afternoon in Singapore, and I'm Andrew Hallam, a teacher sipping coffee with a colleague, Rachel, who's overwhelmed by investing. She saved $20,000 but freezes at the thought of picking funds, fearing she'll mess it up. I'm not you, Andrew, she says. I don't have time to learn this stuff. I smile, because I've heard this before and I know the solution. In Millionaire Teacher, Rule 7 is a lifeline for people like Rachel. You don't have to invest on your own. Low-cost robo-advisors and trusted firms can build and manage a diversified index fund portfolio for you, keeping fees low and emotions in check. Let me share my journey, stories of others who've embraced this rule, and practical steps to get professional help without getting fleeced, so you can build wealth with confidence. Investing can feel like navigating a jungle. Jargon, charts, and market noise make it daunting. Even disciplined investors, like those following rules 1 to 6, can stumble. The book cites a 2016 Dalbar study. The average equity fund investor earned 4.1% annually from 1994 to 2014, while the S&P 500 returned 10.4%. Why? Emotional decisions, selling during crashes, or chasing hot funds. I've seen it firsthand. My friend Mike, a DIY investor, sold his index funds in 2008's crash, losing 40%, then waited until 2011 to reinvest, missing a 68% rebound. Discipline is hard, and that's where Rule 7 shines. Robo-advisors, automated platforms like Betterment or Wealthfront, build low-cost index portfolios, rebalance automatically, and remove emotional bias, all for fees as low as 0.25 to 0.5%, compared to 1 to 2% for traditional advisors. Let's meet Rachel, my overwhelmed colleague. In 2012, I introduced her to Betterment, a US-based robo-advisor. She transferred her $20,000 and answered a questionnaire about her age, 35, income, and risk tolerance. Betterment crafted a 70-30 portfolio, 70% in global stock ETFs, like Vanguard's VTI and VXUS, 0.03 to 0.07% fees, 30% in bond ETFs, like BND, 0.03%. She added $300 monthly, and Betterment handled everything, allocating funds, rebalancing quarterly, and optimizing taxes. By 2016, her portfolio was $32,000, despite market dips, and she paid just $80 annually in fees, 0.25%. A traditional advisor charging 1.5% would have cost $480, eating $1,600 over 4 years. Rachel's story shows that robo-advisors make indexing accessible, even for busy professionals. The book explains why robo-advisors work. They use low-cost ETFs, align with Rule 3's fee focus, and enforce Rule 4's discipline. During the 2008 to 2009 crash, a 60-40 portfolio managed by a robo-advisor would have rebalanced automatically, buying stocks low and selling bonds high, recovering by 2010. DIY investors like Mike, who panicked, lagged behind. The book cites a 2015 study. Robo-advisor portfolios returned 8 to 9% annually from 2010 to 2015, matching or beating most active managers after fees. Betterment and Wealthfront in the U.S., charging 0.25%, manage billions, proving trust in automation. In Canada, BMO Smartfolio, 0.4 to 0.7%, and Wealthsimple, 0.5%, offer similar services, while the UK's Nutmeg, 0.45 to 0.75%, caters to Brits. For those preferring human advisors, Rule 7 suggests firms like Vanguard or Dimensional Fund Advisors, DFA, which prioritize low-cost index strategies. My uncle, Tom, a 55-year-old retiree, used Vanguard's personal advisor services in 2013, investing $100,000. For a 0.3% fee, $300 per year, Vanguard built a 60-40 portfolio, rebalanced it, and provided tax advice. By 2016, his portfolio was $130,000, and he saved $1,200 annually compared to a 1.5% advisor. DFA, available through approved advisors, offers slightly higher fees, 0.4 to 0.6%, but uses evidence-based indexing tilting toward value stocks. The book notes DFA's global equity funds returned 9.1% annually from 2000 to 2015, beating 80% of active funds. Not all advisors are trustworthy. The book warns of traditional advisors pushing high-fee mutual funds, like my colleague Sarah's advisor, who charged 2% on her $50,000, costing $1,000 yearly. In 2010, I helped her switch to Wealthfront, saving $750 annually. By 2016, her $75,000 portfolio was thriving, and she avoided emotional trades during 2015's market wobble. Rule 7's litmus test. Ask advisors, do you use low-cost index funds? If they dodge or push expensive products, run. The book cites a 2015 Morningstar study. Advisors charging over 1% reduce returns by 20 to 30% over 30 years. Global investors can access robo-advisors, too. My student, Wei, a 30-year-old in Singapore, used StashAway 0.2 to 0.8% in 2015, investing 10,000 Singapore dollars in an 80-20 portfolio of US ETFs. By 2016, it was 13,000 Singapore dollars, with $50 monthly fees. In Australia, StockSpot 0.33 to 0.66% serves similar needs. The book emphasizes that 2015 saw robo-advisors manage $50 billion globally, a sign of their reach. Even in smaller markets, like Kenya, platforms like Interactive Brokers offer ETF access, though robo-options are limited. How do you apply Rule 7? First, assess your comfort. If DIY scares you, like Rachel, start with a robo-advisor. Research platforms, Betterment/Wealthfront, US, Wealthsimple, Canada, Nutmeg, UK, or StashAway, Asia. Check fees. Aim for less than 0.5% and ensure they use low-cost ETFs, 0.03 to 0.2%. Open an account, answer risk questions, and automate contributions. If you prefer human advice, choose Vanguard or DFA advisors, verifying fees under 0.5%. Monitor annually to ensure alignment with Rule 5's diversified portfolio. Avoid high-fee traps. The book shows a 1% fee on $100,000 costs $280,000 over 30 years at 8% growth. Rule 7 is about empowerment. Rachel, Tom, Sarah, and Wei aren't investment experts, but they're building wealth with help that's affordable and disciplined. Robo-advisors and trusted firms are your co-pilots, steering you through market storms while you focus on life. You don't have to go it alone. Just choose wisely, keep fees low, and let indexing work its magic. Rule 8. Peek inside a pilferer's playbook. It's a crisp morning in Singapore, and I'm Andrew Hallam, a teacher turned investor, sitting in a school staff room, listening to my colleague Linda lament her dwindling savings. She's been dutifully investing with a financial advisor for years, yet her portfolio barely budges. Curious, I asked to see her statements, and what I find makes my blood boil. She's paying 2.5% annual fees for mutual funds that underperform the market, plus hidden commissions. Linda's been fleeced, not advised. In Millionaire Teacher, Rule 8 pulls back the curtain on the financial industry's playbook, revealing how some advisors act like pilferers, siphoning your wealth with high fees and misleading tactics. Let me share my journey, stories of others caught in these traps, and practical steps to protect your money by choosing low-cost index funds over predatory advice. The financial industry can be a wolf in sheep's clothing. Many advisors aren't fiduciaries, legally bound to act in your best interest. Instead, they earn commissions by pushing high-fee mutual funds, often 1 to 2% annually plus 5% upfront sales loads. These fees compound, slashing your returns. The book illustrates this. A $100,000 investment growing at 8% over 30 years becomes $1,006,266 with a 0.2% fee index fund, but only $574,349 with a 2% fee fund, a $431,917 loss. Advisors know this but prioritize their profits. Rule 8 is your defense, teaching you to spot their tricks and choose advisors who align with Rule 3's low-cost philosophy. Let's start with Linda's story. Her advisor, all charm and jargon, sold her a portfolio of actively managed funds in 2008, promising to beat the market. By 2016, her $50,000 was $60,000, despite the S&P 500 doubling. Why? Fees ate $1,250 yearly, 2.5%, plus a $2,500 upfront load. A Vanguard index fund at 0.05% would have grown to $90,000, saving $22,000. Linda's advisor downplayed index funds, calling them average, a common tactic. The book debunks this. Index funds beat 80 to 90% of active funds after fees, per a 2016 study. When I showed Linda the numbers, she switched to a Vanguard Total Stock Market ETF, VTI, 0.03% fee, vowing to never trust slick salesmen again. Another tactic is dazzling clients with complexity. My colleague, Raj, met an advisor who touted sophisticated funds with names like Global Dynamic Growth. Raj invested $30,000, paying 2% fees plus hidden trading costs. By 2015, his returns lagged the market by 3% annually. The advisor's pitch? You need expertise to navigate volatility. Nonsense. The book cites John Bogle. Simple index funds like the S&P 500 outperform complex strategies 85% of the time over 15 years. Raj moved to a Vanguard Total World Stock ETF, VT, 0.07%, saving $570 yearly. Advisors use jargon to confuse, making you feel too dumb to question them. Some advisors exploit trust. My friend, Sarah, a nurse, inherited $100,000 in 2010. Her advisor, a family friend, put her in funds charging 1.8% fees, claiming they were safe. By 2016, her portfolio was $130,000, but a 0.05% index fund would have hit $160,000. She felt betrayed when I explained the $18,000 fee loss. The book warns of affinity fraud, where advisors target communities, like churches or clubs, using trust to sell high-cost products. A 2015 Morningstar study shows high-fee funds reduce 30-year returns by 20 to 30%. Sarah switched to Wealthfront's robo-advisor, 0.25% fee, reclaiming her wealth. Advisors also push myths, like index funds are risky because they're average. I once debated an advisor at a seminar who claimed his funds beat the market. I showed him data. The S&P 500 outperformed 85% of active funds from 2000 to 2015. He pivoted to personalized service. The book counters. Personalization doesn't justify fees that cost you a house. Another myth is past performance predicts future results. Advisors flaunt 5-star Morningstar funds, but the book cites a 1994 to 2004 study. 70% of top funds underperformed by 2008. My student, Alex, almost fell for this, investing $5,000 in a hot fund in 2014. I steered him to Vanguard's VTI, which grew 30% by 2016, outpacing the advisor's pick. How do advisors get away with this? Commissions. The book reveals that mutual fund companies pay advisors 0.5 to 1% annually to sell their products, plus bonuses for hitting targets. In 2015, U.S. mutual funds charged $130 billion in fees, much of it lining advisors' pockets. Meanwhile, index funds like Vanguard's don't pay commissions, so advisors dismiss them. My uncle, Tom, was sold a 2% fee annuity in 2012, locking his $50,000 for 10 years. By 2016, it grew to $55,000. A Vanguard index fund would have hit $65,000. He learned too late. Always ask, how are you paid? How do you apply Rule 8? First, question advisors. Ask, what's your total fee, including hidden costs? Do you recommend low-cost index funds? Are you a fiduciary? If they dodge or push high-fee products, walk away. The book suggests firms like Vanguard, 0.3% advisory fee, or Dimensional Fund Advisors, DFA, 0.4 to 0.6%, which use index-like strategies. Second, check statements for expense ratios. Over 0.3% is a red flag. Third, consider robo-advisors like Betterment, 0.25%, which align with Rule 7. Fourth, educate yourself with books like Bogle's The Little Book of Common Sense Investing. My student, Priya, did this, moving her $10,000 to a Vanguard ETF in 2015, saving $200 yearly. Rule 8 is your shield against pilferers. Linda, Raj, Sarah, and Tom learned the hard way, but you don't have to. The financial industry thrives on ignorance, but knowledge is power. Choose low-cost index funds, vet advisors ruthlessly, and keep your wealth where it belongs, in your pocket. Peek inside the pilferer's playbook, and you'll never be their prey. Rule 9, avoid seduction. It's 1999, and I'm Andrew Hallam, a young teacher in Canada, sitting in a dimly lit seminar room, heart racing as a slick presenter pitches Instacash loans, a guaranteed 54% annual return. I'm skeptical but intrigued. Could this be my ticket to early retirement? Against my better judgment, I invest $7,000, only to watch it vanish when the scheme collapses, revealed as a Ponzi fraud. That painful lesson became the cornerstone of Millionaire Teacher's Rule 9, avoid seduction. The financial world is full of sirens, get-rich-quick schemes, hyped-up stocks, and trendy investments that lure you with promises of wealth but leave you shipwrecked. Let me share my story, tales of others burned by seduction, and practical steps to stick to low-cost index funds, ensuring your wealth grows steadily without falling for financial traps. Seduction in investing is about greed exploiting hope. The book warns that flashy opportunities, Ponzi schemes, speculative stocks, gold, hedge funds, or exotic ETFs rarely deliver. Instead, they cost you time, money, and peace of mind. My Instacash fiasco taught me this the hard way. The presenter used testimonials and fake data to hook me, a classic Ponzi tactic where early investors are paid with later ones' money until the scheme implodes. I wasn't alone. Thousands lost millions. The book cites a 2015 study. 94% of investment scams collapse within 12 years, and only 7% outperform the market. Rule 9's mantra is clear. If it sounds too good to be true, it is. Stick to diversified index funds, like Vanguard's Total Stock Market ETF, VTI, 0.03% fee, which returned 10% annually from 1926 to 2016. Let's meet my colleague, Greg, who fell for investment newsletters in 2000. He subscribed to the Gilder Technology Report, hyped for picking tech winners during the dot-com boom. Greg invested $20,000 in its top picks, like Nortel and Cisco, expecting to double his money. By 2002, the tech bubble burst, and his portfolio plummeted 97% to $600. Nortel, once $124 a share, fell to 47 cents. Cisco lost 80%. The book notes that Gilder's picks lost 94% from 2000 to 2002, while a global index fund gained 10% by 2007. Greg's mistake? Chasing hype. Newsletters thrive on bold predictions, but a 2016 study shows only 7% beat the market long-term. Greg switched to a Vanguard Total World Stock ETF, VT, 0.07%, vowing to ignore hot tips. Another seductive trap is gold. In 2011, my friend Lisa, a nurse, invested $10,000 in gold at $1,900 an ounce, swayed by TV ads claiming it was a safe haven. By 2016, gold was $1,200, a 37% loss, while the S&P 500 gained 47%. The book debunks gold's allure. $1 invested in 1801 grew to $54 by 2016 versus $16.24 million for stocks. Gold doesn't produce income like companies. It's speculative, driven by fear or greed. Lisa sold at a loss, moving to a 60-40 index portfolio, VTI/BND, which grew 20% by 2018. Rule 9's lesson: avoid assets with no intrinsic growth. Hedge funds, with their aura of exclusivity, are another siren. In 2010, my colleague Raj, a lawyer, invested $50,000 in a hedge fund charging 2% fees plus 20% of profits, expecting elite returns. From 2010 to 2015, it returned 6.8% annually, while the S&P 500 hit 14.2%. Raj lost $15,000 to fees, per the book's math. A 2015 study shows 80% of hedge funds underperform index funds after fees. Raj switched to Vanguard's S&P 500 ETF, VOO, 0.03%, saving $1,000 yearly. Hedge funds seduce with complexity, but simplicity wins. Emerging markets, like China or India, also tempt investors. In 2008, my student's dad, Chun, invested $30,000 in a China stock fund, chasing its 20% growth. By 2016, China's index lost 30%, while the S&P 500 gained 47%. The book explains, fast-growing economies often have volatile, overpriced stocks. From 1990 to 2010, global index funds outperformed emerging markets 60% of the time. Chen moved to a Vanguard Total International Stock ETF, VXUS, 0.07%, gaining 15% by 2018. Rule 9 advises broad diversification, not betting on one region. Junk bonds and complex ETFs, like currency hedged or smart beta, are further traps. The book cites a 2016 study. 60% of smart beta ETFs, 0.5 to 1% fees, underperform traditional index funds. My cousin, Emma, invested $15,000 in a currency-hedged ETF in 2014, paying 0.5% fees. By 2016, it lagged VTI by 10%. She switched, saving $70 yearly. Junk bonds, with high yields, default often, losing 20 to 30% in downturns like 2008. Simple index funds avoid these risks. How do you apply Rule 9? First, be skeptical. If a pitch promises high returns with no risk, walk away. The book suggests asking, what's the worst-case scenario? Second, stick to low-cost index funds, VTI, VXUS, BND, fees less than 0.1%. Third, ignore media hype. CNBC or newsletters thrive on sensationalism. Fourth, diversify globally to avoid sector or country bets. Fifth, learn from history. A $10,000 index portfolio in 2000 grew to $28,000 by 2016, despite crashes, per the book. My student, Priya, followed this, investing $5,000 in VD in 2015. By 2016, it was $5,800, steady and safe. Rule 9 is your armor against seduction. I lost $7,000 to a Ponzi scheme. Greg, Lisa, Raj, and Chun fell for hype. You don't have to. The financial world's sirens sing loudly, but low-cost index funds are your steady ship. Avoid the traps, stay disciplined, and build wealth that lasts. Conclusion. As we wrap up, let's reflect on Andrew Hallam's journey and the power of his 9 rules. Starting as a teacher with no financial background, Hallam became a millionaire by his late 30s through discipline, not luck. His rules: spend frugally, harness compound interest, choose low-cost index funds, control emotions, build balanced portfolios, invest globally, use trusted advisors, avoid predatory schemes, and steer clear of hype, are a blueprint for financial independence. They're not just for teachers or the wealthy. They're for anyone willing to learn what schools don't teach. Hallam's stories, from his dad's rusty Datsun to the Ponzi scheme that burned him, make these lessons relatable. His students, who open Vanguard accounts as teens, show that these principles are teachable and transformative. The book's data, stock market returns, fee impacts, and historical comparisons grounds his advice in evidence, while his humor and humility keep it accessible. The broader implication is clear. Financial literacy is a life skill, as vital as reading or math. Hallam dreams of a world where these rules are part of every high school curriculum, preventing the financial train wrecks he sees in overspending colleagues and debt-laden NBA stars. His call to action, live long, prosper, and pass on what you learn, invites us to share this wisdom, empowering others to avoid debt, invest wisely, and achieve true wealth. Whether you're a young professional, a retiree, or somewhere in between, Millionaire Teacher offers a roadmap to financial security. Start small, stay consistent, and let time and discipline work their magic. As Hallam proves, you don't need a big salary to become a millionaire, just the right rules.